So the question I have is this. First question I want is I think you're very much a fan of Peter Obi. I know a lot of people are fans of him as well, within the diaspora and in Nigeria. But as I've seen with a person like Mamdani, that is a great figure in America. Well, he's not that great because really he's a democratic socialist. He's still a Democrat. But because of how far right America is, he's like a shining beacon. But if if Peter Obi gets elected in the 2027 elections, let's pray and hope that it's not rigged, or Tinubu is so unpopular that he can't win. Do you see him making that much of a change in a system in itself that needs to be dismantled to some degree?
No, I do not. So I actually like the comparison you made with Mamdani. I think even the comparing him with Mamdani is probably over-egging him a little bit. Because Mamdani at least makes some noises about doing things that sound somewhat revolutionary, even if they're really not. In P.O.'s case, his popularity, to be honest, it's more a function of, it's the kind of popularity that the kid who scores 5 out of 10 in class gains when he moves to a class where everyone scores 0.
Yeah.
So, and I say this as someone who obviously was a very public supporter of his. There's nothing revolutionary about him.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, his entire selling point is, I am sane. That's it.
And I'm not as corrupt as the people in power.
Exactly. That's his entire selling point. There is nothing, there's no idea that he has expressed that makes you think, this is a radical departure from what has come before. Or there's no sound bite that has been credited to him that you think, wow, I haven't heard this from anyone before. There's nothing revolutionary about him. He's the establishment candidate in an establishment in an establishment where the other candidates are so, ideally they will be so unelectable that it then makes him look spectacular in comparison. But Nigeria being Nigeria, even though they are unelectable, that has nothing to do with whether they actually get into power or not, because it's not, the actual mechanics of getting into power are not about winning votes. And that was what he found out to his detriment as well, because after the last election, which everybody and their dog knows he won, and then these people came with some of the crudest, most rudimentary rigging tactics you have ever seen, using Tipex on ballot papers and all kinds of stuff. It was in the open, it wasn't a secret. And what was needed from him at that point was to not necessarily even go full Trump or something and try and egg his supporters out into the street or something, but just something as simple as call a press conference and act presidential, take charge of the situation. And he just basically hid in his house throughout the entire time. So this, the easiest way or the most accurate way of understanding and contextualizing him is that he's a super wealthy industrialist. He's a billionaire, a multi-billionaire in Naira. So he's in USD he's like a centimillionaire. So he has everything to lose if the entire country were to actually go up in flames. He has everything to lose. So he's not the guy who is going to tell young Nigerians, get out into the streets and burn shit down. Even if that is what is needed, he's never the guy who's going to do that, because a lot of the shit that will be getting burned down is his stuff. And that's the paradox with him. So it's either an unfortunate, just a very unfortunate sequence of events that has led to, being stuck with this kind of choice in Nigeria, or maybe the establishment is more intelligent than we gave it credit for, and it has made it such that even when you're looking for an alternative, the alternative that is presented is still captured by the same establishment.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, Nigeria doesn't have an actual mainstream revolutionary political figure. Right now, it doesn't. Every single mainstream political figure or well-known political operator in Nigeria is part of the same establishment. So this is what I mean when I say that Nigeria has no opposition. There are opposition parties or entities that claim to be opposition parties, but there's no opposition ideology. There's no opposition movement.
What about like a
Well, that's so. It's good you mentioned that, because again, it further ties into what I'm saying about there being no genuine revolutionary. Because this guy, first of all, who signs his checks? It's the Ford Foundation and the Omidyar Network and MacArthur Foundation, which everything I've said is basically CIA with extra steps.
Oh Lord, yeah.
Right. It's U.S. secret intelligence money behind all these things. So if the guy who is in power now, everybody and their dog knows that he's being blackmailed by the U.S. government, he's owned by them.
Yeah.
And then you are claiming to be his revolutionary socialist opposition, and the same U.S. government is basically signing your checks. Then that means, again, that establishment controls both of you, and you are controlled opposition.
It's kind of like a Museveni and Bobby Wine.
Exactly. That's the most perfect comparison. That's exactly what it is. So there is no, just like in Uganda, there is no actual opposition, because everyone is captured by the same paradigm, and then using all their energies, all their political energies, to compete inside an artificially restricted paradigm, which, so if by some miracle Museveni falls and Bobby Wine were to become president, absolutely nothing would have changed, but people would feel so euphoric.
Yeah.
Because they would feel like we've taken down the dictator. Same thing in Nigeria. If Tinubu, by some miracle, were to lose the next election and he ended up with an Atiku or a Peter Obi or a Eleshiore, it would be the same. It will still be like it might not be as bad.
Yeah.
Like there might be some aesthetic and cosmetic differences. It will not be in your face, but at its heart, the same basic issues, which are essentially taking instructions from the IMF and the World Bank and using them to run the country. Those will not change. In fact, during the last election, one of Peter Obi's primary campaign talking points was that as soon as he gets into power, he's going to remove fuel subsidies.
Oh.
That was an IMF talking point.
Yeah. Okay, so it's clear that there's a systemic corruption within Nigeria, and I think if you look at like a Burkina Faso or the AES, we see that there's like a rise in strongmen. It seems that Nigeria's military is the problem as well as the solution, in that it's the corrupt backbone of a system of extraction. So, do you feel like if the system has to be changed, there would be a need for a strongman in the military, kind of like a Abacha or a Abubakar Umar or someone like that? Or
ideally, that would be the case. However, the very far-sighted, and I don't say that as a compliment, the very far-sighted thing that was done in the early to mid-noughties in Nigeria was that the Nigerian military was strategically defined. The Nigerian Air Force in particular, because if you examine the historical record of Nigeria's seven military coups, I think about 5 of them were incubated within the Air Force. So under the Obasanjo presidency, he himself was an ex-general anyway, the strategic decision was made to strategically defund and defang the Nigerian military, especially the Nigerian Air Force. So there was like a decade of deliberate underinvestment.
So it turns
and that gap still exists today. And it wasn't just underinvestment into like equipment and hardware and stuff. It was also deliberate underinvestment into updating its what's the term I'm looking for? Its doctrine, its training doctrine for officers, and then this deliberate erosion of its entry process. So what is the process of getting admission to the National Defense Academy to become an officer? Because bear in mind, the military recruits are not the people that you need to think about at all. The actual soldiers on the ground, the privates, they basically have no power. And they only just take orders. The real people who wield power and who could potentially incubate a coup or anything like that is the officer corps, right? So the people who go to the National Defense Academy. What is the process for getting admission? And you discover that it's a completely political process. So over the past 2 decades or so, everyone who has been allowed to enter the officer corps in the Nigerian military, all three branches, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army, they are all compromised people from the start. Because there was no objective process. There was no there's a word I'm looking for, but basically the process for getting them into the officer corps, it was that I know this person is my uncle who is a senator. This person is my uncle, he's a traditional ruler in some place in Abia State. This person who, it's actually a thing in Nigeria. You might be surprised to know this. It's actually an official thing that if you're like a Senate president or a senator, or you have an important public position, you are allocated slots to nominate candidates to get admission into the National Defense Academy. That's actually how it is. So I have cousins, I have relatives who are in the officer corps, and the reason they were able to get in is because we come from an influential family. So we have people, there are a couple of traditional rulers from within our family, there are a couple of high-ranking officers from within our family. So they were able to go meet this uncle or that uncle and get a paper from him and take that to the National Defense Academy, and that was the basis for their admission, not the entrance exam, the mandatory entrance exam that they took and they passed. Without that paper from this and that person, they wouldn't have got in. So the sum and total effect of all of this on the Nigerian military is that it is one of the most depoliticized militaries that you've ever met in the world. It's a completely, everyone there is completely rational, and I don't mean that as a compliment. Everyone there is a capitalist.
Jesus.
In every sense of the word, right?
So it's like mercenaries.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So there is no real sense of ideological grounding that we're protecting a country, and the country that we're protecting is going to hell in a handbasket, so we need to step in, because that's the ideological basis of every military coup.
Yeah.
In this case, there is no ideological basis for anything to incubate. So that's the very unfortunate thing that has happened to the Nigerian military. So unfortunately, I don't really see any solution coming from that direction. I mean, I've had dealings with some of these people, even in my capacity as a journalist. And something as simple as, for example, superior officers withholding pay from the officers that they're overseeing, right? And these people, bear in mind, these are armed people, relatively well-educated, they have some measure of power.
Yeah.
And their idea for dealing with that situation is to come meet me, come send me messages, like a civilian who happens to be a journalist on exile outside the country, send me messages and tell me, please make it viral. And hope that the social media embarrassment is what will get them their money. And I'm like, dude, you're holding a military grade rifle, you're holding an M4 or an AK-47, you have military training, you know strategy like the back of your hand, you went to a war college, you've gone to officer training programs at Sandhurst or wherever. Why are you coming to meet me? What help am I supposed to render to you?
Man. Yeah. So what can be done then? It's very. The more I listen, the more I'm like, is it? You think it's a matter of education? Because in Jamaica, there may be some corruption, but we still have a sense of identity, and we have a strong sense of politics and socialist values. So you would never have a coup here. You know what I mean? There's a understanding of...
Not anymore. I think the last time a coup with any kind of socialist underpinning happened in Nigeria was 1994.
Abacha?
Yes. I don't think it's going to happen again, at least not with the current crop of officers who are in all three branches of the services. It's just not going to happen. The ethos that has been inculcated into them from day one is that everything is a transaction. They're capitalists in every sense of the term. So, which is why what I advocate for is for the Nigerian people themselves to do something visually spectacular. Because at this point, I fully believe that is the only way that the course of history is going to be altered. The people, there needs to be a China-style, 1949 kind of uprising.
Yeah, Chairman Mao.
That literally needs to happen.
There needs to be
that literally needs to happen.
But is the education system set up in a way as that? Do they have do they read I read Marxism, I read Lenin, when I was in high school I read stuff like that. So there's
I think you know the answer to that question. Yes, absolutely not. So one thing obviously you have to appreciate is that Nigeria has been marked as a target for decades. So this process of degrading the consciousness of Nigerians didn't begin recently. It goes back as far back as the 70s. So because then Nigeria had this reputation back in the day for being a country that absorbed some of the bullets that were meant for other African and even Caribbean countries. At a time, Nigeria was once the so-called giant, once upon a time. And it was targeted for that. It was punished for that. So one of the things that was done in the 1980s when Nigeria had its first IMF structural adjustment program, one of the conditions for that program, believe it or not, was the degradation of the educational system in Nigeria. So for example, you might be surprised to know that history was removed as a compulsory subject from Nigerian schools. It was removed, right? One of the other conditions for this supposed funding program was that government expenditure on education has to shrink. That basically the world economy doesn't need tertiary educated Nigerians or Africans, that secondary education is enough, basically. So basically that the Nigerian government was opening too many universities and we don't really need more of you educated black kids.
Jeez, yeah.
Right? And then something else that was done was that this was under the terms of the structural adjustment program. Media ownership was opened up to foreign investment for the first time. So for the first time, the information space in Nigeria was then opened up to anybody and everybody. And then American money poured in. So there's some effect of all of this over the decades is that now we have a population of 230 million people, most of whom don't really have a strong sense of national identity. Everyone thinks they're one thing or the other. Nobody really understands what it means to be Nigerian anymore.
So okay,
right, so if you
sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If you were to I have received flack for basically stating publicly that I am, because I own my politics publicly, and I am very much anti-West, and I say so publicly. And the biggest amount of flack that I get is from fellow Nigerians who think that describing yourself as anti-West is somehow something wrong, because they genuinely don't know that the entity called the West doesn't include them. They genuinely don't know that.
Yeah.
They genuinely believe that because they also speak English, they also worship a Christian God, they also wear suits and ties and whatnot, and they also have those affectations of being polite English gentlemen, that somehow they are part of the Western paradigm. They genuinely believe that. So if you say that you are anti-West, then it's almost taken as an attack on what they think is their identity. Who do you think you are? And that didn't happen by accident. That's a process that began in the late 70s and early 80s to basically morph the entirety of Nigerian political consciousness. So that's how come we're in this situation now where, as bad as things are, you might be like, things probably wouldn't get as bad in Jamaica before there'd be a nationwide riot.
I mean, the 70s we were close. We almost had it in the 70s. We had a socialist leader. The CIA, the opposition went to the CIA. The CIA flooded Jamaica with guns. And there was almost a mass migration for like the 70s to the 80s when things calmed down and things are better, but we still have, the guns are still like here. You know what I mean? That's why Jamaica, it's nice, but there are periods of like, you'll have a friend that will just die by gunmen and you're like, what? You know what I mean? So we still have stuff like that, but Jamaica, I would say Cuba and Haiti made the right decision of being anti-imperialist. Jamaica kind of played itself as a tourist haven. So, but we still have the mind of, you know, you have a lot of radical and strong-minded people, but we're still kind of placating to the West. Even now, I think the Prime Minister did not hand over oil to Cuba last week. So we're still kind of placating to the West. Yeah, so it still is a thing. But I wanted to ask you then, because we see the AES, and to be honest, it seems as if Burkina Faso was always headed to where it is now, in that they always had a culture of conscious leaders. You know what I mean? And to have Ibrahim Traore come it's a great thing. What do you think will happen? Do you feel like, in terms of growth, do you think the movement will spread, or are you kind of like holding your breath? Because the problem I'm seeing is the military in Nigeria is right there, and they're basically allowing themselves to be used by Western imperialists to invade, and I'm very nervous. So I was kind of wanted to hear your thoughts.
It's not just the Nigerian military. It's the fact that Nigeria itself is basically being retrofitted into a giant Western military base, right? The process has begun. Like they've made an official request. So something you may not be aware of is that since the 70s, one recurrent request from the U.S. State Department has been to cite a U.S. military base in Nigeria, and every successive government, even the puppet governments, always knocked them back. That always happened. This is the first time under Tinubu that preliminary permission has been given, right? And very cleverly, they didn't phrase it as a U.S. military base. They said it's a U.S. Air Force drone refueling base, which is a U.S. military base with extra steps.
Yeah.
Right? Because what the hell is a drone refueling base? Right? It's an Air Force base, literally. That's literally what it is.
Yeah.
Right? And it's being sited in the northeast, you know, close to the borders of the AES, close to the border with Niger. Yeah. So I suspect that in addition to using the Nigerian military in the way that it was used in Benin, there will come a time when even Nigeria itself, if we do not course correct, we are going to become basically Iraq. We're going to become like this huge vassal state that is used as a staging point to destabilize our neighbors. I fear that is a real possibility, and in that eventuality, of course, it goes without saying, in that eventuality, that millions of Nigerians themselves are going to die, because such a thing will not be peaceful.
Yeah, and the American military are not like, they'll murder and rape. You know what I mean? They're not the they're not the best morally.
Exactly. So that, however, having said that, I also have to give the AES some credit that they have seen this coming clearly, and they are, in my opinion, they are making all of the right moves. They are not actively ratcheting up the rhetoric, and they are not actively like looking for the conflict. But in terms of equipping their military, first of all, they're doing that as best they can. Secondly, in terms of making the right geopolitical alignments, they have avoided that terrible error, that terrible mistake of trying to be quote-unquote non-aligned. They have avoided that mistake. They have aligned themselves with Russia, which I think is the smartest thing they could have done in that circumstance. and it has been explicit in such a way that whoever wants to actively look for a problem with the AES knows that they are at risk of getting into a shooting war with Russia, which nobody wants. Right? So it's like which doesn't mean that they're not still going to try, but it means that they have to do it using proxies. And those proxies obviously cannot be, it's not, if you're using like armed terrorist groups as a proxy army, it can never be the same as like having your actual national army. Doing the destabilization. So that kind of makes it slightly less difficult for them to defend themselves and to repel. So in a purely military sense, I think they will be okay. What I'm more worried about actually is if Nigeria does implode upon itself, there's going to be this human wave which nobody can do anything about, right? Because if there's like a country of 230 million people, if just 20 million of that number, if just 20 million people were to flood into neighboring countries, that would create war, basically, in those other countries. Like Burkina Faso is, I think, how many people does Burkina Faso have?
I think it's 30?
Like 24 million people. 24? So it's not population-wise, it's not a very big country. It's the size of 2 states in Nigeria, basically.
Wow.
So if two states in Nigeria were to empty out, and some of them were to find their way to the AES, what are you going to do? You cannot, except you're going to send your military to, carry out a genocide against them, which obviously they're not going to do.
Yeah.
So that puts a strain on available resources, on food, on everything, and it creates social conflicts like schisms. It'll be a mess.
I have to ask you though. Sorry. Finish your point. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
No. Okay. So whenever I have conversation with my Western friends, which is my white friends, they will say that Ibrahim Traore is a Russian puppet. Or that's the one, because they say that Russia owns.
Of course, they would say that.
Yeah, they say Russia owns 80% of the gold of the mines. Therefore, it's basically another colonial project, but Russia is the one in charge, and that. He's a puppet, and a lot of the stuff that they're saying is just propaganda. That is what they say. And I had a little argument, a back and forth with a friend yesterday about it, and he was like, where is he getting all this money to build all these resources and build all these roads? He's clearly a puppet. What would you say to someone that makes a comment like that?
Yeah, people don't read. That's why they say stupid shit like that. Where did he get all the money? It's very simple. Burkina Faso used to export gold nuggets, basically raw unprocessed gold. Which basically goes for pennies on the dollar. Now, one of the first things he did when he came into power was he constructed a gold refinery. So now they export gold bullion. Simple as that. Simple as that. Gold nuggets versus gold bullion. Beneficiation of the resources that are present in their own country. That's where what looks like the excess money is coming from. They were getting robbed previously. And they simply stemmed some of the bleeding. They've not even stemmed all of it. They simply stemmed some of the bleeding. And that's what's giving them the runway to do some of these things that they're doing.
Yeah.
They haven't even finished stemming the bleeding because they're still being robbed in some other ways. But just the loopholes that they've been able to plug, specifically in terms of gold mining, that's what has made all of this difference. And bear in mind, gold is just one of the resources. There are others.
Yeah, but what about the ownership with the Russian? Like it's 80% ownership to 15%.
So again, I don't know whether it's like Reuters or the Financial Times that started spreading this rumor that
it's like
80%.
It's a mining lease or something like that. That's what they said.
Because based on the contract that I read, they've been given an 8-year mining lease, and apparently in exchange for investing such and such amount into actually developing the place, they've been giving an 85% stake, and then the Burkina Faso government has a 15% stake, but it's for 8 years. So basically, after that 8 years, it refers to fully. It refers to the full ownership of the Burkinabe government. So basically, the development of the mining sites and the technology and everything, the Russian entity puts all of that money in, and it carries out all that technology transfer.
Yeah.
And then makes its money back over 8 years, and then transfers it.
Yeah, I think
so. I don't know why people always see the first part and they don't see the second part.
I think it's a cynicism that a lot of people have, like that's internalized in terms of, like our basically sovereignty, like African nations becoming sovereign. There's a cynicism attached to it. I think because to me, AES is doing exceptional work.
It's a uniquely Western cynicism. Because that's like, and this is the thing about Western people in general. I don't just mean Western leaders, I mean Western citizens, including the ordinary people, some of whom describe themselves as anti-imperialists because they're all infected with the imperialist virus.
Yeah.
They have this way of assuming that the whole world thinks exactly the way they do. And everybody's just like them. Even when that's not the case at all.
That's not the case at all. Yeah, I think America is like, the West is in the minority at this point in terms of certain like their own policies. Because I remember when I was being in Japan and I was just like, man, like quality of life is so much better. I think there still is a Western influence that's going on globally where I feel like everyone kind of has this stress of, wow, rent is expensive, everything feels expensive. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if you're feeling that in Ghana, where it's kind of like, wow, everything.
Oh yes, oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. Everything is priced for tourists.
Yeah, for tourists. I mean, I think the only one I've seen, it seems like it's not happening is China. You know what I mean? Where it's not that, where everything doesn't feel exceptionally expensive, cost of living is not high. So there's so we're now in
the Chinese government has taken specific, deliberate action to make its economy centered around Chinese people, not around foreign capital.
Yeah, we can only hope that Africa gets to that point. You know what I mean? So okay, now that we're seeing the decline of the West, where the West is absolutely in decline, where do you see, like in 10 years, where do you see Africa heading? And I'm going to talk specifically about AES, Ghana, and Nigeria, because I feel like those are the main, to me, they're the ones that I feel like the president of Ghana is really doing some great moves. He has the right vision, he's heading in the right direction. Nigeria is heading, like going off a cliff. It's like a car that's on the borderline heading off, going downhill. Well, it's like you're watching a crash waiting to happen. So what are your thoughts on that in like 10 years? What ideally what would you say?
So in 10 years, ideally, the AES will no longer be spoken of in terms of potential, but as an ongoing manifest reality. And I think the reason is very obvious. There's basically a trading block of 72 million people that has been created through the AES. By that time, the infrastructure projects linking all of them should have been completed. Infrastructure for me is the most important thing, because once, especially transport infrastructure, once it's been built and it's being used and the trade starts to sort of quicken, basically, if you're trying to accelerate an economy, build infrastructure that makes it easier and cheaper to move goods and resources around. Simple as that. And that's what they're doing. And the larger the number of people that can have these interactions, the larger the economy. That's economics 101.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they're doing. So they're not focused on building supply chains to build their export capacity. No, they're focused on building infrastructure to link their populations to each other. Right. So up until now, as you're aware, a lot of the infrastructure till today continues to be colonial infrastructure, which basically exists to extract things from the interior and take it to the coast.
Yeah.
Today, most of the roads on this continent lead to the coast. They lead to a port.
Yeah.
Till today, that's just the reality. You can't deny it. Even here in Ghana, it's the same.
Yeah.
Right. So what they are doing is they are basically drawing up a whole new infrastructure map, which, to the best of my knowledge, hasn't really been done. in Africa before, in sub-Saharan Africa before. Right? So and some of these projects have already kicked off. So in another 10 years, when basically all of them should be done, the new railways and the roads and the bridges and the hospitals and the schools, they will basically have built a whole new economic paradigm for 72. By then, it should be touching close to 100 million people by then. And ideally, what that would then do is that the giant that Nigeria was supposed to be, they would have become that giant. They would have taken that position.
Yeah. Man.
And once that happens, and they're operating from a position of strength, not from the defensive position that they're currently operating from. Once that happens, then that changes everything. That changes power dynamics completely. Right? Once the AES becomes, for example, the largest economy in West Africa, once they surpass Nigeria, or they start contesting with Nigeria for the largest economy in West Africa, then that changes the entire power balance. Countries like Ghana, which Ghana, as you know, has this talent for sort of standing in the middle, never really declaring for a side. Ghana will be forced to basically take a decision. And the economics will force it to do that. Right, where we have the AES, its major economic problem is that it's landlocked. It doesn't have direct access to the ocean. So it uses a number of neighboring countries as its proxy ports. One of them is Ghana. Ghana is Burkina Faso's. It's basically Burkina Faso's port. The port in Tema, which is a few miles from here, is basically Traore's port. Like if you're seeing any heavy equipment coming in, it's probably going to Burkina Faso, and there's a lot of it. So when you get to the point where you're doing so much trade volume through that port, and most of it is going to the AES, you're not really going to be in a position economically to turn them down. Right.
Exactly.
So, and anyone who can shift Ghana, because Ghana is basically the geopolitical fulcrum of West Africa. It's, in my opinion, it's the most important country in West Africa, even though it's not the biggest. It sits at the middle of West Africa, like the geographical and ideological, metaphorical middle of West Africa. It has strong ties with everybody. So it has very strong ties with the AES, because Ghana and Burkina Faso have historically very, very strong ties. And then it also has very strong ties with Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire, which represent the other end of the ideological spectrum. Nobody has beef with Ghana. Literally nobody. They're friends with everybody. Everybody trades with them. And a lot of the institutions like ECOWAS and whatnot, a lot of those institutions actually have a large part of their infrastructure physically located here in Accra. So if someone is able to shift Ghana, that person has shifted West Africa. And that's what I think is going to happen within the next 10 years. The AES is going to become powerful enough to shift Ghana. And once that happens, then that changes the entire power dynamic of the region. I think the best thing that can happen to West Africa is for a new hegemon to arise. Because Nigeria currently, this is not a very popular thing to say, but Nigeria is basically
a failed state.
It's a demerit to the region right now. It's literally dragging the region back. And when I say dragging back, I don't just mean in terms of being a dead weight or not being good enough. I mean it's being actively used as a tool to retard the progress of West Africa.
Do you think if Peter Obi gets elected, that he would push back on some of Tinubu's just allowing themselves to be used by the West? Do you think Peter Obi would stop that or no?
I have no. So the problem with him is that he habitually never takes a position on anything. He campaigns exclusively in platitudes and sound bites.
Like a politician. He sounds
politicians in as much as they might do that, they also have one or two topics that they speak or they appear to speak plainly on. Even though that in itself is a political strategy. But he doesn't even do that. Like if you're listening to him talk, it's like you can play a bingo game with the buzzwords and catchphrases that he uses. It's like he's saying a whole lot, but he's not really saying anything either.
Oh Lord.
Yeah. So on the one hand, you can say like there are a couple of things I do like about the things he says. Like he references the example of China a lot in terms of growing an economy. I definitely like that because it shows that economically his feet maybe are on the ground.
Yeah.
Right. Because once you have a candidate who is talking about, oh, look at how the US did it, then I know this person has no idea what they're talking about. Right.
Yeah.
So, but he uses the example of China, which I think is the only example really for large-scale poverty eradication in the global south over the past half century. Yeah. So I like that. On the other hand, like when Trump started making these noises about going in guns a-blazing into Nigeria and bombing Nigeria and all of that, he didn't take a stand against it. And he said something to the effect of, well, it's because the Nigerian government has failed, so now someone else has to come in and protect the people. I was like, what kind of stupid ass imperialist talking point is this? So he's not that guy, unfortunately. I wish he was, but he's just not that guy.
Ah, boy. Man, I feel like I should save these other questions for tomorrow when we do like the Zoom interview, because I want to hear. You don't seem to talk about Goodluck Jonathan at all.
I have a lot of thoughts about him. A lot, actually.
I feel like under him, Nigeria was doing well.
Absolutely. Which was why he was taken out.
Man. So I mean tomorrow I have some more in-depth questions to ask. So I definitely would just save these up for tomorrow. I feel like it was just good to kind of just talk, just to kind of see where exactly why I'm reaching out, and in terms of where directions of the interview I wanted to take.